Hello everyone and welcome to This Nintendo Life episode 93. I'm MBZ and I'm here, joined, as always, in this E3 hype fever lead up by Bally. How you doing, Bally?
Hi MBZ, I'm melting in the Belgian sun.
Look, I brought this up when we started talking, but I'm just sitting here with no clothes on because it is also
You're
hot
not meant
in
to give it
Edinburgh.
away.
Look, we have to give it away, Bally, because I have to make the point that the medium of podcasts is my favourite medium for a reason. Not only can you just walk around anywhere and listen to them, but even if you're recording them, there's no pressure. You're not on a camera. No one gives a shit. All they can hear is your voice, and no one would know otherwise. See, I could go through this whole podcast. No one would imagine, hey, NBZ's sitting there in his pants and nothing else, but that's what I'm doing right now. You know,
Well,
it's wonderful.
You've now created the visual image of it, so everyone can now visualize that for their own enjoyment.
Their own sordid pleasures.
I was going to use
of
the word
course.
pleasure, but that was maybe a bit too far.
No, I think it is. Absolutely is.
Okay.
But yes, we're
Each to
here.
their own.
We're not here to talk about our sordid pleasures. We're here to talk about Nintendo's. So let's do that. Bally, what have we got coming up in the show today?
For our first segment, we're going to talk about what we have been playing. For our second segment, we're also going to have emails. And then for the third segment this time, there's a little game called ARMS, which is around the corner. And there's been an ARMS Direct that we're going to talk about. And we're about to try out the ARMS Global Testpunch tomorrow. So we will be talking about that for the third segment as well.
Absolutely, and that is going to be an interesting thing. So, last segment we'll dive into the arms with our legs. I don't know. No, these are all
And when I said like it's round the corner, you know, like that's
Yep.
something I can imagine you doing in that game,
Yep.
like punching around the corner.
I think my least favorite thing about arms has just been the general people trying to pun on arms and legs and all this nonsense.
I enjoyed Nintendo voice chat when they were speaking about the new Nintendo Switch cases that were coming out, and there's now this bright yellow case that children are carrying around that just says ARMS on it.
Out of context. That's
exactly.
just weird.
So like, I'm sure there's lots of cases being carried around airports right now that just say ARMS, which is probably not the best idea.
No, well, you know, at some point an IP becomes recognized enough. There's a lot of names in history that make no sense until they eventually do. But we're not here to talk about that. Well, we are, but we'll talk about it later. Instead, we're going to talk about the video games, what we've been playing. Bally, I know you finally beat Zelda, so tell us.
Good one.
Yeah.
Not yet, but I have been making progress, and I will talk about that
totally.
imminently.
Exactly.
But every now and then, back in the good old Wii U days, I remember those days. MBZ, you'd say to me, Bally, there's this great game I played on Steam that is now on sale on the Wii U, and I think you should play it. And I say, oh, MBZ, my backlog's too big, I don't want to buy it. And you're like, Bally, it's like £3. You have to buy it. So I was like,
that's
okay.
a fucking less than a McDonald's. Like, you've got to buy this game.
I know, and these are often games that like you've enjoyed greatly, and then you say you need to try them. And we say this again and again. You've got a good track record. There's very few games that fall flat. So
yeah,
I downloaded a long time ago. Thomas Was Alone.
Yes.
On the Wii U. It came out 2013, I want to say, on Steam or something.
I guess. I mean, I played it on PlayStation 3 for the first time, and it came as a part of PlayStation Plus back in the day. So I don't think I ever actually paid for this game. I think I got it on Steam through a bundle because that's how PC works. You own everything because bundles. But yeah, I played it. I think I played it in one sitting
nice.
back on PS3, which is possible to do with this game, but I'm not sure I would recommend it because I think it's actually nice as kind of more bite-sized chunks and that kind of thing.
I mean,
so tell everyone what.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to set it up to say what Thomas Was Alone is because it doesn't really say what the game is.
It's a fairly straightforward puzzle platformer that uses rectangles and squares, but the twist on it is that there's a narrator's voice carrying you through a story the entire way, and each block that you're controlling is a character with a name, and like they all have different attitudes and feelings about one another, and they all have different abilities, which is important. And we say abilities, but ultimately the vast majority, the difference in abilities is simply how high they can jump, although there are some more unusual abilities that I'll get to in a second.
or even just their shape, like some people
Exactly,
or some
just
blocks.
their
See, I say
shape.
people because they do such a good job of like creating characters around these just simple shapes. But yeah, it's like some are shorter than others, so they can slide under things, or some can reach higher spots and that kind of stuff.
Exactly. So it's just this incredible, because when I saw trailers of this game, because I like looking through my backlog of games and looking through trailers and trying to understand, like, what shall I play next? How long is this game? How long will this take me to beat? What can I talk about next on the podcast? And I sort of looked at a trailer for Thomas Was Alone, and obviously none of the narration came through in that trailer, and I was like, this looks really simple and a little bit dull. Why would I want to play this? I wanted to give it a go anyway. And the whole narration thing just really shocked me. I don't know the voice actor's name. It's a British accent, but
it is. I think it's Danny something. I can't quite remember, but I believe he presented the video game BAFTAs at some point. But he's very good.
It's almost like we need to just retroactively just insert your future knowledge into this part of the podcast. Then we said,
yeah, thanks for giving me work to do, Bally. Cheers.
There's some work to do, but the narration works really well. He really genuinely makes the game far more interesting than it arguably should be, which sounds really strange. But yeah, all the characters are very, I don't know. But I was playing a lot of this with Caroline. She made this very good point that the game's incredibly sexist in the sense that you just sort of all, at the start, you start with Thomas, and then I believe it's Chris, and then it's John. And I think after those two, you meet your first female character, who is Claire. And Claire is the first character who has a very different ability to the first three characters who are male, because she is a massive floating block that you use to get across sort of water features in the game. And not only that, but like the narrator clearly describes Claire's feelings about her appearance, and she's very, very nervous about her image. And it's like all the men, like, they're all just like doing whatever. They all jump different heights and things. But then they have Claire, which is just like this sort of stereotypical, how should I say it? Person who's obsessed about their image and is arguably overweight. And like, that's just a really not a great thing for this game to portray. I don't know. Do you remember this bit?
Yeah, I don't know. I've never thought about it in that sense. I mean, when I was playing, the narrative is, I always found the narrative as a fun like embellishment for the puzzle platforming, and didn't think about it as much. I think also back then I wasn't thinking about these types of things that much, so it never really came up to me.
I've got another example to back this up, Mblem, and that's Laura, who is a long rectangle that is quite flat, and everyone uses Laura to jump on to like get between platforms. Okay. So between Claire and Laura, you're just sort of these two female characters that are essentially just used.
They're just stepping stones.
Stepping stones by the men. And the narrator makes it clear that they're both very concerned about how the other blocks, cubes, squares, rectangles, however you want to describe them, sort of judge them. So
I mean, you could say that, hey, this looks sexist, but it also could be, deliberate commentary, deliberately portraying them in that sense to
I think
get
you're
across
right.
the message that, hey, this is the way in which these kind of, women are portrayed in games and media generally. I don't think that you can necessarily jump the gun there, but I think it's interesting commentary if you draw it out.
Yeah, definitely. You're right. It might be a commentary on how society is and
exactly.
And definitely
in a game about literal squares and rectangles, which is, it's pretty crazy.
And definitely the most powerful block cube, however you want to describe it, in the game is later in the game is Sarah, who's like this little cube who's like just crazy, like impressive and helpful and confident, and then does all this crazy stuff with like a double jump and things like that. So yeah, I don't know. I think they could have portrayed some of the male blocks in a less less positive light, perhaps, or done
Sure.
something to even it out a bit. It just feels like, especially poor Claire and Laura get an awful lot of the flag in this game.
Yeah, no, I see that.
It's interesting, and I love that we're having this sort of philosophical debate about society based on a game about blocks.
Yeah, it's great.
Which is what is so unique about this game, is that it's, like I said, a very simple idea with a nice narrative brought about through it. I think that as a game itself, like the gameplay, the mechanics, it's very simple, and I think that some of the later levels get a little bit frustrating. I don't think the game is massively well optimized for Wii U, in the sense that as the narrator comes in and speaks, there are a few times where blocks were sort of jumping one off each other, and then just because the narrator started speaking, the game would glitch and some of the blocks might fall or something. I'm like, this is a bit great. This is rubbish. Like, why isn't this working properly? So I'm worried that it's maybe not perfectly optimized and might have been rushed out. Who knows? But
that's a shame. Yeah.
I also think that the Wii U version comes with added DLC. So I don't know if you ever played this DLC.
No, because I played it when it came out. So
there's a couple more characters, and the story sort of continues a bit longer.
Okay.
I did it, but it felt like a little bit too much. Like the game overstayed its welcome ever so slightly, in my view. And I think that as good as the story, as good as the narrator is, I think that the story falls flat in the sense. So I'm going to spoil the story of this game. It's been out a while, but just a warning if you do want to play this game and not spoil the story.
I wouldn't necessarily. I don't remember what the story is.
Well,
so
that's a big problem. Like, the story is really weak in the sense that I think the narrative portrays it to be. It feels like they're building up to this big fourth wall breaking ending. So it's decided that, like, the cubes are like in this machine or mechanism or digital space, however you want to describe it, and then all of a sudden there's like some big breakout or link to the real world at the end. And there is to some degree, but they don't fully go for it and tell it well. So I think that it would have been nice if it just had a bit of a better story at the end, because, as I've said, the narrator works so well, and just combining a great narrator with a good story would have really taken this game to the next level, I think.
Yeah. I mean, for me, the game and its story is literally a reason to push you through these puzzle platforming levels, other than, hey, figure this out. And I think it just adds character to it in a way that lets the game be more unique than it otherwise would be, because otherwise it's just this random game that gets lost on Steam.
Yeah. Or it's almost like Fire Emblem, where the overarching story is not that great, but the way they sort of talk about the characters and that sort of sense is really good and strong.
It provides like context and
precisely.
That kind of
so yeah, it could have done more, but as it is, it's really great, and all the characters have character, and that's just a fantastic thing to say about a game about blocks. Which is cool. So
that I don't have to edit this in, his name is Danny Wallace. Is the name of
Danny
this,
Wallace?
There we go. So
cool, great. But yeah, this game wasn't what I was expecting at all, and it's a cool game, and it's a neat idea, and I like it when games take a genre like the puzzle platformer and do a twist on it, because we've played, both of us, quite a lot of puzzle platformers, so it's nice to see something a bit different. But yeah,
totally
enjoyed it.
Great. No, it's one of those games that I'm like, okay, this is really cheap. You should just probably play this. It's not. I don't feel like that strongly about Thomas Was Alone, but I've always thought it's a very interesting game, and I knew you'd get something out of it, so that's why I gave it the recommendation. But yeah, good stuff. Glad you got through that. Anything else that you've been dipping into aside from Zelda?
Oh, I've started Shovel Knight. Spectre Knight. What's it called? Something of Torment?
It's Spectre of Torment.
Spectre of Torment. I started that. I'll hopefully play more of that and maybe even beat it for next time. So I'll talk about that then. MBZ.
Great. So I got a new Fire Emblem game because Fire Emblem came out.
More Fire Emblem.
Yep. So this is weird.
We had three last year.
Because I believe it came out on the anniversary of the European release of Fire Emblem Fates, because I remember last year having finished my exams early and waiting like a couple of weeks for Fates to come out. It was on the 19th of May, I believe, and this came out on the 19th of May. 19th of May was like the day after my exams finished, so it was like I finished this thing and then I have a Fire Emblem game, so it's pretty good. A nice kind of pot of gold at the end of...
How did Nintendo know your exam schedule?
They just, they ask me, they text. I text Nintendo. We go back and forth. We snap. That's how it works. That's how our relationship goes. So this came out, Fire Emblem Echoes, Shadows of Valentia, which for those people who don't know, which a lot of people probably do, is a remake of a old Japanese Fire Emblem game. This is the second in the series, called Fire Emblem Gaiden. It was a side story, like a lot of NES games, Famicom games back in the day. Of course, this is on... in Japan, so it was on the Famicom. It is a bit of a break in convention from what the first game sets up. So, you have your Castlevania 2s and your freaking, Mario 2s and Zelda 2s that are all completely different. And this one is very similar because it sets up a premise that is, pretty traditional Fire Emblem. It's war and all this stuff, but a lot of the mechanical changes.
That's a good description of Fire Emblem.
War and stuff is
war
Fire
and
Emblem.
All this stuff.
Yeah, but the mechanical changes are much more significant, and I'll get into that. But maybe let's just set up kind of the story, because I think so far the story hasn't been mind blowing, but for me, what's really set it apart is. It's very simple, it's very clear, and the voice acting lends an incredible amount to this game. So going into it, I knew it would have voice acting because people have been talking about it, but the level to which they do it is actually ridiculous, and I never thought a Nintendo game would go this far. It's to the point where even you're coming across like people whose NPC names are woman and young man, and like they are throwaway characters, but they have voiced dialogue. Like these NPCs that literally don't even have a name are voiced by someone, which I thought was a level that Nintendo wouldn't really try to do, and it's very impressive. And I think that might have to do with the fact that 8.4 were the people behind the localization. I think they've done a bang-up job. It's really excellent, but it's everywhere. It's not just between chapters. It's support conversations are voiced as well. And though the support conversations are not as long or maybe as in-depth as some of the ones in Awakening or Fate, I think the writing is significantly better, and I just think that they get across so much more by having these characters' voices heard, and that makes me more invested in the story, because otherwise it's kind of, sometimes I find in Fire Emblem games a bit of a slog going through the dialogue, because they're talking about kingdoms and kings, and I like medieval stuff, but I think war and stuff. I think Fire Emblem sometimes gets a little bogged down in the details. I think Path of Radiance is actually really bad about this, where it's very politically driven, but in a way that is overly complex and doesn't really make a huge amount of sense unless you're really paying attention. And this game is much more simple. It's like you have these two characters, Arm and Celica. They're childhood friends, and I really like the game, the way it sets itself up is because you play a battle when they're kids. Like it starts off with a kind of prologue, and
I like it when games do that.
Yeah, but you have these 6 kid characters, and it kind of ties in mechanically, because they are shit against, an invasion happens, and they suck. And you have this one, like, grandfather character called Myson, who, like, basically is a paladin, and he just wrecks all of the enemies. So it's kind of that situation where they're creating a story and a narrative through that first map, which I thought was awesome. And then you have the time skip, jump 10 years or whatever, and they're all grown up. But Arm and Celica are now split apart, and they're in these 2 different places. And that's kind of how the game goes, is you are using these 2 different armies. You're playing as Arm and Celica, and you have these 2 different groups of characters that you're getting along your way, and you're on 2 different sides of the maps. And eventually you'll meet, and then you split apart again, and that's kind of the structure of the game, right? Which I like, because what it's done is it's meant that I'm not benching any characters. Every single character in this game is allowed to be used in battle, so far, what I've seen. And I have like maybe 15 or so on each side, and it hasn't given me a hard limit yet. Every time I take to the field, I don't have to leave anyone behind. And I have enjoyed that, because so much of my time in Fire Emblem has been, okay, bench this guy, never use him again. And it's a shame, because unless you play through the game again and deliberately make the choice to use that character, you never really get an attachment to them, and you never really use them. But so far, everyone has had to pull their weight, and I've had to, use everyone. So that's good. Some people obviously get left behind, level-wise, because they're not as great. I'm looking at you, Tobin, you piece of shit. Also, Bowie, he's terrible. A lot of characters are significantly worse than others, and you can tell. But I like the fact that you are able to use all of them, because that's something that hasn't really been done before.
You said 2 sides. There's 2 different plots going along in tandem. Is that right?
Basically, and it's interesting because it's split in, the game is split into acts, and the structure is very different because it's not like you're going from chapter to chapter. It very much feels like you're going through a war campaign, right? Because it's the maps themselves are not very memorable, and I think a lot of people have brought that up as a flaw of this game, and I totally understand where they're coming from, because some of the strongest stuff about Fates was in Conquest level design, where these maps were visually distinctive, they had very smart enemy placement, and they had interesting objectives for you to go after. So I get that perspective, but despite this game having much simpler maps and just killing all the enemies being the objective and just going through, it makes it feel like a more standardized war, in that you're just finding these battles and you're just grudging on through, because as you go along the map, every battle you get into is designated a day in time. And so if you move a different square and keep moving back and forth, time will pass essentially. And I don't know if this actually has an effect on gameplay, but every time you enter a new battle, it will be like the 106th day of this blah blah blah. So it feels like you're waging a campaign essentially across the map, and time is passing. So for me and those kind of simple map designs, it works because it ties more into the story than I feel it has before in a Fire Emblem game, and I like that. I think it's just something different. It feels... The problem I had with Birthright was it felt like they were just trying things to be a little bit different, but a little bit the same, and they couldn't decide which side of the fence to sit on, so they just fucking squarely jammed their balls in the center and didn't want to move, right? Whereas Echoes feels like it jumped over the fence and is like sitting in the corner twiddling its thumbs doing its own thing, right? So though a lot of things are very different, I think that it's to its benefit because it feels like a different approach to this style of game. And that's in a lot of different aspects, where when you're going to villages and you're recruiting characters that way, you don't recruit characters on the battlefield anymore. Like you can go back to a previous place and recruit someone if you've missed them, and they're kind of just standing around like NPCs. It's kind of like you played Rhythm Thief, because I'm trying to think of the context, because you've had those kind of point and click areas that you said were very Layton-esque, and this is a similar thing where it's like you go into towns, you move from area to area, and you can talk to people, you can examine things, you can pick up items and objects along the way, and then sometimes there's like these shiny spots where you can click and you get these memories. So it almost is like Breath of the Wild in some respect, where some of the past things that have happened before this game or in the intervening 10 years are displayed in cutscenes called, I guess they're called memories. I know they're called memory prisms or something. And you can watch like previous events that have happened. So I like that they're giving you story in that way as well. It's very cool. And it feels bite-sized. Every map you go past is very short. It doesn't quite have that kind of Fire Emblem Heroes quick thing, which I appreciate, because that game is... It's too much, it's too distilled, it's not like what I want from Fire Emblem, but it's not these sprawling 3-hour conquest maps that I was doing either. So it's found this really interesting balance where it's more of a story focus. There's not as much thought put into the maps and level design, but I think that it's giving me an experience that another Fire Emblem game hasn't, so I appreciate it for that respect.
This wouldn't be a Fire Emblem discussion without finding out what difficulty you're playing this on, and how does that work in this game in comparison to the trilogy that came out last year.
So I don't believe you can change difficulty on the fly. I'm not sure, because I didn't go on hard. I just played on normal, because I usually with Fire Emblem games I just play on normal classic. That's my usual standard, and so far it's actually I found it pretty easy. I've seen some reviews where people have been like, oh, this is a really hard game, because a lot of the time they're talking about these enemies called canters, and canters have the ability to summon a bunch of enemies and then heal themselves and then just keep summoning until basically endlessly. So they endlessly spawn enemies, which sounds bad. And when I was going into this game, I'm like, oh god, that's going to be a pain. But I think these people are just bad at Fire Emblem. I don't know, because what I found. Well, I've played a lot of Fire Emblem, so I find that I have the ability to get into position and deal with things easily. First of all, the terrors that they summon are really weak, so they do hardly any damage, and they're not very threatening. And second, if you play it smartly, I just did a map basically where the boss was in this locked off center room, and you could have the choice of going through this path through a bunch of enemies, and the things that he was spawning were things that you essentially probably couldn't get to if you weren't smart enough. But I have 3 Pegasus Knights, so I just basically fly inside the room and kill the Cantor before he summons too many of his minions, and then he's not a problem anymore, right? Like, there are ways of dealing with these situations that, because I played a lot of Fire Emblem, I'm like, I could probably circumvent this if I want to, and so I do. So I understand that this probably isn't the best game to jump into if you've never played one before, but I don't think it's too hard either. Like, I've never really had too much of a challenge. And it hasn't really felt grindy either, because that's another thing this game adds, is those dungeons, those 3D dungeons, which looked very curious when I first saw them. I'm like, I don't know how this is going to work.
What
because
do you do? What do you get from those? How does that work?
So I imagine them more like Persona dungeons, in the sense that they don't feel randomly generated, but they're not very interesting in terms of design. Yeah, they're kind of just caves and underground, but they look really nice. I think they've done generally a great job of this game looking good. And so you just run around with your character, and there are boxes that you can smash with your sword to get like money out of. There are hidden treasure chests in different rooms, so you really want to explore the entire space to get some items and things like that. And then you'll come across enemies, but the way it works is if you run into an enemy, then you'll go into a battle. And it basically switches from the 3D perspective to the top-down traditional Fire Emblem thing. And it's usually very few enemies. It's like 3 or 4, and then you just go through a quick battle, and they're done, and you move on.
That is fascinating that Fire Emblem is going... I'm not saying they're completely changing their style to go... I don't even know how you describe this. What, dungeon crawl?
Yeah, dungeon crawling.
RPG, perhaps. But, like...
Yeah.
Are they just like dipping their toe in the water to see if this is something that like you think Fire Emblem fans might like, and then potentially next time round make an entire game in that mold?
I don't know that they would do that. I think, first of all, you have to remember this is a remake of a game that was very weird and is still weird right now. You know, it's breaking a lot of convention, and it does strange things. Back in the day, these dungeons existed only because it was on the Famicom. They weren't 3D running around things. They were 2D dungeons where you would run into enemies and go into that stuff. So you do have to remember the context of what this game is. But that said, I think it's a cool idea, and I think they could implement it somewhere. I just don't think it's super interesting. It doesn't feel like there's a real reason for it to exist, aside from the fact that they have this interesting fatigue system whereby the more characters attack or lose health or whatever, the more their kind of mood will go down. So you have like 4 different smiley faces of mood, and if you get too low, then your maximum hit points will reduce for that temple or whatever. So you have to basically micromanage your units by feeding them food, and by doing that, they basically lift their mood, they gain some health back. And so far, I haven't really had to do a lot of that because the dungeons are really short. Like, they're not very sprawling at all. They're very kind of contained areas that you feel like you can explore within 10-15 minutes and be done. But I think that they are made interesting by the fact they have that fatigue system hanging over, so you're not just running around mindlessly. You do have to pay attention to every battle you get into. You have to be like, okay, I used Claire a lot in that last battle, so maybe I won't use her in this battle because otherwise her fatigue will go down too much, you know? It's kind of micromanaging, making you use your whole party almost, which makes sense given the fact that they're letting you use a lot of these people on the battlefield anyway, without, you know, holding back and not letting you use them. So I think it's cool, and, you know, you do damage. So if you hit an enemy before you go into the battle, like strike them with your sword, they take damage from that. So when you start the battle, they'll have a bit of their HP reduced. So it benefits you to be alert and be able to hit them. But it also ties into the class changing in this game, which is at the end of these dungeons, you get to a statue, which is like this goddess as part of the world. And by praying to the statue, if you're a high enough level, you can change your class. So there's no master seals. There's none of that. You change your class by doing that. And you also change your class early in this game, and most people have said don't wait, don't grind to level 20, which is like goes against all Fire Emblem instincts, which is, hey, make sure you have got the most levels possible out of you, because there's a system whereby, I'm not exactly sure how it works, but like the amount of bonuses you get for upgrading your class are going to stay the same regardless. So even if you like gain levels, the amount it increases by is going to stay the same. So there's no point in just grinding your characters, because they're not going to gain any material benefit out of it. It's better to just be more powerful and be a better class and gain access to different things than just to stagnate and stay there. So that's weird. It's just like, okay, I need to class change straight away. But with the pacing of the game so far, it feels like it's worked out. And it's weird because like there are like sometimes 3 class changes, and everyone upgrades at different levels. Like someone upgraded at level 14 as opposed to someone at level 12, and other people are upgrading at level 7. It's just really across the board just fucked up. There's no consistency whatsoever, which is maybe throwing me off a little bit, but I do like it. I like that it's just being strange and not doing things that I expect. So yeah, I've really enjoyed it. I'm like at the end of Act 3. I'm just about to start Act 4. I believe there are 5 acts in the game, and I'm about 20 hours in. So I think I'll probably beat it by around 30. But yeah, there's some weird choices being made, and even down to the fact that like you can only hold one thing at once. So if you want to have a sword, that means you can't hold a piece of food, right? So like if you want to, cure your fatigue and you don't have a piece of food, you have to go to the convoy and get it from there. Or if you want to hold a shield, you can do that and that'll boost your defense, but then you don't have like a good weapon. Like everyone has a weapon without holding anything, but if you give them a better weapon, it increases their stuff essentially. So and then like mages will learn spells as they level up, but also you can get abilities or skills from using a weapon a lot. So like if you have a sword, it will have like question marks on it, and if you use that sword a bunch, you'll unlock a skill by wielding that sword. So loads of strange things in here for sure, but I have really been enjoying it, and it feels different. I think my one criticism is on the world map, because they're treating this like a campaign, and every move you make on the map is one day. When you want to upgrade a unit and you're like, oh, I have to go back to the temple to do that, as you're moving across the map, enemies will spawn and start moving and chasing you, and if they chase you and run into you, it automatically spawns a battle and they get the first move. So sometimes you can just get fucked because an enemy just gets the first move and your healer is in a place that you didn't position them in, and hey, they just killed them in one hit. So yeah, that's bad. But if you're smart about it, you can move so that you ambush them as opposed to them getting you. So you need to pay a little bit of attention. That's the one thing that's been a little bit annoying for me as I've gone through. Yeah, man, this most of all, this gets me excited for Fire Emblem on Switch, because if they up their production values, if they keep the story simple but straight down the line, but also have all this voice acting, and they bring back more traditional kind of Fire Emblem design and maps and all that stuff, I think we're going to have a killer game on Switch next year. And I'm looking forward to it. And honestly, I'm really glad this game came out, because it is, I love Fire Emblem, and I do sometimes get burned out on it, but I've played a lot of Fire Emblem in my life. It's very hard for me to get burned out, but I think the reason I like this so much is because it is really different and refreshing, and just giving me something. It feels like more of a traditional JRPG than a Fire Emblem game, and I think that's a very good thing, because as great as the Fire Emblem series is, it feels kind of similar as it goes along, and they don't make a huge amount of changes. This is just a complete break from convention, and it's a throwback, obviously, because that's what it is. But yeah, it's great. And Bally, I know you don't want to play more Fire Emblem, but at some point, down the line, I would say that this is actually one that's interesting to go back to, because it is so standout from the rest.
I think my current Fire Emblem plan is to come back to Conquest at some point this year.
Yeah.
And then take on Fire Emblem Switch whenever that comes.
Yeah, that sounds good.
That's my grand plan.
Yeah, no, sounds good to me. But yeah, that's it. Fire Emblem Echo Shadows of Valentia. Go check it out. It's pretty cool. And that's going to be us for the first segment. But don't go anywhere, because we shall return after the break with some of your emails.
Welcome back to the second segment of episode 93 of This Nintendo Life. As it is the second segment, that means it is time for your listener emails. Before I get onto the first listener email, however, I should make clear that we need more emails. We have our pre-E3 episode coming up next time on the show, and we're going to be making some E3 predictions. So we want your E3 predictions. So please send them in. We want to hear what you think is going to happen at E3 2017 for Nintendo. So,
and you got to send that to an email address.
Sorry, that's a very good point. Let me say the email address, of course, is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com.
One of my favorite things when Brad Shoemaker took over the Bombcast was he kept forgetting to say the email every week, and Jeff would just have to chime in with Bombcast. I don't remember the fucking email.
Giant Bombcast at
Bombcast@giantbomb.com, I guess. I don't know.
There we go.
Anyway, sorry to ruin
send an
everything.
email to them. Send an email to us. There you go.
No, don't. Yeah, send us to both. Who cares?
Send them to both. We can. Everyone can use some emails. Our first email is from Andy S, who's from Singapore. Hi, Bally and Lordnbz. Love the show, but this is my first time writing in. I was wondering what you think are the chances we will see additional DLC packs for MK8D, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, in the future. Personally, I can see a new Donk City course after Mario Odyssey is released, and maybe an ARMS battle arena. Personally, I don't think we will see Mario Kart 9 for at least 2 years now, but given the new games and IPs being released by Nintendo, I can certainly see them adding DLC and maybe even a season pass. And if they do, I'll be straight in there. Look forward to receiving your response, Andy in Singapore.
All right, Andy, thank you for writing in. New email, I believe. So, if you're out there, just send in some emails. You might get read on the show.
We love new people writing in. It's great.
Absolutely. Well, it's an interesting proposition, right? Because I think
it's a huge question.
It is a huge question. And
future of Mario Kart, where do we go?
Yeah, so we've talked before about the Smashification of Mario Kart and how it's trending that direction, and we've also made the argument that it would probably be a stupid move to drop the name Mario Kart and to change it to something else because of the marketing reasons. Because Mario Kart 8 Deluxe has sold astronomically well, considering that it's a re-release of a game that already came out, right? And it makes sense because the Switch is way more successful and popular than the Wii U ever was, but it also lends the question of what do they do now, what do they do next, and whether DLC happens or not is very much dependent on, is there a new Mario Kart in the works right now that is coming out in 3-4 years, or are they starting to move towards a more service-based model, which I think a lot of the industry is maybe leaning into. And when you look at things like Destiny and the years that they support that game, and things like Rocket League, I know that they've been talking about how they don't necessarily want to go and make a Rocket League 2 because their community is there in that game, and it benefits them to just keep adding and keep expanding on a concept, when if they do a sequel, it's likely just going to be the same thing, but then they're going to annoy people who have to buy a new game, right? So it comes down to this idea of whether Nintendo want to lean into that service-based model, and if they do, it means that Mario Kart 8 Deluxe isn't just a game in the series, it then turns into a platform where they can continue over the life of the system to add things on, to give you new tracks, new characters, and to change and evolve the game as it goes.
Right.
And I don't know if that's what they want to do, but the Wii U has given them a unique position where they have these incredibly strong brands like Splatoon and Smash Brothers and Mario Kart that are all online based, and you have one direction, which is the Mario Kart add-on stuff. You have another direction, which is the iteration with Splatoon 2 and putting out a game that is different and has new stuff, but is basically building on the same concepts. So the real question, Bally, which way do they go? And do you think that they will go the DLC route again?
I don't, for the simple reason that if you look at the opportunity cost, of course DLC for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe would do really well, or if like you said, there is some sort of the model is a subscription based in any sort of way. But if you're creating a platform for a subscription model, I can't see them doing it on a remake of an older game when they could make...
I'm not really talking like subscription. When I say service-based, I mean more like, hey, we give more content to this thing that already exists, whether that be free content or DLC add-ons or that kind of thing.
Okay, fair enough. I can't see them doing that with the old model, and this is an old model, it's an old game. Like I think they would do it for the new game, because like we've already said, Mario Kart is a huge brand, if not the biggest brand, when it comes to sales, certainly, and they want to be so protective of that brand. I worry that DLC that comes out, say, later this year, start of next year, even beyond that, you need a gap, and you need that time and space just for people's appetite for another Mario Kart to come around again. And you'll get to that situation where you can have a Mario Kart 9, even if that is the smashification of Mario Kart, like we can get into. That will come around faster by not having DLC for this existing game. And if the sooner they can get Mario Kart 9 out, the better for them, because that will make more money to them than DLC will for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. So it's about how they transition to Mario Kart 9 sort of the smoothest way possible. And I think DLC scuppers that to some degree.
So you think that basically it takes away resources from effort that could be put into a completely new...
Not just resources, but people's appetite for more Mario Kart. Like I know that there's a lot of people who love Mario Kart, and we love Mario Kart. I love Mario Kart, but I'm not... People just aren't going to buy Deluxe, all the DLC, and then 9 in the numbers that something like Mario Kart Wii did. Like that's not going to happen. You need that breathing time in between, and that you need to create that breathing time by making sure that there's not DLC for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe.
Yeah, I think they also need to make distinctions, and I think the position they've put themselves in is Mario Kart 8 is the ultimate traditional Mario Kart when you look at it. It has a huge wealth of courses, it looks gorgeous, it controls, for most people, well. I think it's okay.
Controls amazingly, MBZ. And the item balance is perfect.
Let's not even get into that. For all intents and purposes, for most people, this is the perfect Mario Kart game. It's portable, you can take it anywhere. And there is a problem, I think, that if they release Mario Kart 9 and don't make significant enough diversions from the formula or change something mechanically about the series to make it stand out, most people are going to be like, I already own Mario Kart. Why do I need another one? You know, and especially when Deluxe, I think the problem they have with Deluxe is it has so much shit in it that any product that they release after looks weaker by comparison if they're just doing the traditional model. Because if they come out with, hey, this is the same number of courses that the original Mario Kart 8 had, well, next to the 48 or whatever it is that Deluxe has, it looks less significant. And that's a disadvantage because, you know, you had 2 DLC packs that came with that game. So they may have sewed themselves into a bit of a situation, although having said that, it's Mario Kart. So to be fair, most people are just going to buy it sight unseen, right? It's kind of their ace in the hole. When they have an issue, it's like, okay, we have these 2 switches on the wall, Mario Kart and Pokemon. Which one do we want to make some money today? All right, let's just flick these 2 switches, you know, and they're done. But there is that risk, I do think, because Mario Kart 8 is such a compelling package and it has so much in it that if they just go out there and it's like Mario Kart 9 and it just looks the same again, I don't know. I don't know how well that translates.
Yeah, it's a really tricky one. And as a Nintendo fan, the big distinction I would see, but I would want and expect between 8 and 9 is the smashification. I want a Metroid themed track. Like, I need multiple Metroid themed tracks. I need Pikmin themed tracks. This is what I want. This is what I want, where I want this series to go.
I think they may even need to go in the direction of, like, change, not sticking so rigidly to the model of the kart and having the ability for Kirby to, you know, be on a star or Samus to be inside her ship, like being a bit more flexible with the ways in which you traverse the course. And even having Sonic in there if you want as a third-party guest character and just running, you know?
Just running.
Which, you know, I think will recall a lot of bad memories for people who remember Sonic R, which is it's a travesty of a game, which I watched them play on Giant Bomb's UPF the other day. And I think I actually own a copy of Sonic R on PC because I saw it at some shop years ago and put it in my laptop and tried to play it, and it was a mess. Actually, I think I put it in my grandparents' computer back in London. This was like when I was 8 or something, and they had a copy which had like Sonic's all these weird Sonic games. Anyway, tangent aside.
Much.
I was saying is like build the courses and the
I agree.
The carts not necessarily being as carts
keep
themselves.
Mario in the cart. There you go, Mario Kart.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
perfect.
But there was the idea early on in the GameCube of the Donkey Kong racing, and you were like riding on dolphins and on barrels and that kind of stuff. I want to see a bit more creativity put into the actual races and their distinctions, because I think one of my big issues with Mario Kart right now is it really doesn't matter what racer you choose unless you're concerned about weight. Right, weight rating is really the only difference. Like, there's no special powers you get for being Donkey Kong. That's where
Double Dash was so special on numerous Lordnbz. Like, they had specific powers for characters, on top of the fact that you're completely redesigning the game and having 2 characters per kart. Like, bring that back to some degree. Even if you don't do the double karts, do the unique items, do something. Like, characters in Smash Brothers have their final smashes. They feel very different. They have different moves. Like, there's a lot of room to play with, and ultimately, when you're doing so many new and interesting tracks based on all these crazy worlds that Nintendo have covered over their history, like, there's the scope for what they could do. When you really do think about the smashification of Mario Kart is huge, and they really need to blow it out the park, because like we've already said, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is the perfect Mario Kart package, and to go better than the perfect Mario Kart package, you have to reinvent Mario Kart. Like, you can't just make an even more perfect package. You simply have to reinvent the system, reinvent the wheel, and that's probably where they're going to go, surely. And I think 2 years is a decent and is a good shout for like when Mario, this, I guess it could still be called Mario Kart 9, will come about, and it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, I think it may be a little longer, if only because that team is working on ARMS, and ARMS is just about to come out, so I think they may want to give themselves a bit more time, especially if we're thinking of more of a revision of the entire Mario Kart world. Then they would maybe take 3 years or something along those lines. But that
Bring
team's
back
great.
Mission mode.
And ARMS is looking good, so we'll see how that goes. But in terms of, I think the other problem that Mario Kart 8 Deluxe faces in terms of DLC is it is touted as a kind of Game of the Year edition, right? And what you expect with that kind of product is it has all the DLC included, which it does. Is DLC granted from the Wii U version, but all that stuff is already in there. And my worry with Mario Kart 8 Deluxe getting more DLC would be, hey, this kind of undermines the entire idea of the product, which is it comes with everything in the box.
Right.
Yeah.
It's what can you say? It's a pretty good problem for Nintendo to have. Like,
maybe.
Whatever option they choose, they're going to make an absolute bomb of money on any of these options. It's just about, what do the fans want? What do Mario Kart fans want? What do fans who only buy perhaps every other Mario Kart want? Because they're incredibly important too. Like, there's probably a group of fans who the last Mario Kart they bought might have been 7, or maybe even the Wii version. Like, how do you? And they don't want to buy these most recent versions because it's just too similar. Like, reinvent the game, do something different. That's why Double Dash is arguably my favorite Mario Kart, because it does unique stuff, and
it's the most out there.
It's the most out there. It's great. I love it. I want that game back. Give it to me.
Yeah, and I think the last point I want to make is, if we're looking at how Nintendo has approached ARMS and how unique and different all the characters are, and obviously that makes much more sense because a fighting game is inherently focused more on character than on stages. But like, if we're taking a grander view of like what Overwatch has done in terms of, hey, we have created this stable of characters that people love and associate. And I mean, even to a different extent with Dota and League of Legends, where people play different characters and different heroes. Like, I think we've been seeing over the last 6-7 years the gradual growth of that idea of like having these different characters with their different identities, Mario Kart could benefit from that if they're like, hey, Donkey Kong has a special power where bongos come out and do whatever on the course, or Mario gets flood out and does some weird thing, like, and adding these kind of smash weird things to the formula to make it so that the character you pick actually matters and it's not just an aesthetic thing.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I will sit back with my popcorn and watch how this will play out, because I love some Mario Kart, and I hope they look after it well, because 8 was a really great game, and like we've already said, we're going to eventually pick up this remake, because who doesn't want Mario Kart on their Switch? It's great. It's amazing.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, depending on where they go with the next Mario Kart, if they announce it early enough, then and the price of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is never going down, so I'm never going to get it for a good price probably. I may just want to wait and see what 9 brings, because that could be the one that actually is more worthwhile having on the Switch. But we'll see. Regardless, look.
Times.
We have like Barcelona on a plane playing Switches with Mario Kart, giving Nintendo free marketing, and I saw what's his name, Mayer, the guy who sings with the guitar, John Mayer, is that his name? That guy?
God. The guy
he
who sings with the guitar?
Yeah, John Mayer, right? That's his name.
I don't know what we're talking about. I'm completely lost, Emblem.
Okay, for God's sake. There was a picture of the Barcelona football team playing Switches, basically.
Okay, got you.
And also on Twitter, John Mayer, that guy with the guitar who sings, or whatever the fuck his name is, he was tweeting about how the Nintendo Switch is the greatest invention since Wi-Fi for traveling musicians. And everyone is talking about Mario Kart 8 as this great thing. And
were these Barcelona players like genuinely just doing it for their own fun, or were they being paid by Nintendo as like a promotional thing? Or
don't know. I think they might have been. It's hard to tell, honestly, with this stuff. But
interesting. I need to look this up.
Anyway, lots of people, lots of celebrities basically going crazy that they can play Mario Kart wherever they want, and that, despite the fact that that's been a thing you've been able to do for a while, by the way, because 3DS, I think that just the notion,
so good.
Right, the notion of Switch being a proper console and having that on the go is something that I think messaging wise has really got through to a lot of people. And you have these celebrities singing Nintendo's praises, which is quite frankly the best marketing you can get. These days with our culture and society and how celebrity focused it is.
So our next email is from Tom, who's from the internet. By the power of the internet, I command you to answer my arbitrary and specific video game question. In a previous episode, you guys talked about online functions for a GameCube Virtual Console. Do you think it would be a wasted opportunity for Nintendo not to do this for Melee specifically? Trying to buy a copy of Melee now will cost somewhere between $70 and $150, and to play online you need a complicated setup for a fan-made server like Anther's Ladder. Do you think that Nintendo will put in the effort to do that, or do you think they will just release the game with no online function, if at all? Also, have either of you thought about growing a mustache? Your time-traveling grandfather, Tom.
Thanks, Tom, for the email. Bally, I feel like you grow a beard and don't keep the moustache most of the time.
I do grow a beard and I don't keep the moustache because it looks horrendous by itself.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a good moustache. I just think moustaches look horrendous.
I think, it gets to kind of puby stage, right? Where it's just a bit straggly and you can't...
Oh, no, it's not straggly. It's thick. I just don't like it.
Okay, yeah, I don't know. I feel like my moustache just never goes anywhere. I don't feel like my beard never goes anywhere for whatever reason. It's just I get too scraggly, and it's not actually. It never grows at the pace that I want it to, and it never gets fuzzy.
The N in NBZ stands for neckbeard.
Yeah, of course. that's the only place hair ever grows on my
NBZ,
face.
Neckbeard Z.
It's horrible. It's real bad. But yeah, that's how it goes. Anyway, yeah. Well, maybe one day, Tom. Maybe
what was the question again? Right, Melee.
Moustaches, yeah. Melee and moustaches. So I think let's maybe step back from just Melee, because I think he's he's a Smash Brothers fan and wants to. He knows the name of fan-made servers, so he's deep into this. I think it's an interesting question to talk just more generally about the GameCube Virtual Console and online functionality for a lot of these multiplayer games, because you have things like Mario Kart Double Dash, which. Back in the day, I don't think it actually had online, but it had LAN capabilities.
It had LAN. You could put GameCubes next to each other, I believe, and you got a cable that if you take your GameCube and take off the bottom, there's like 3 different random slots for cables. There's some cable you can get that links the 2.
Right, and then you could have 2 TVs and have potentially 8 people playing at the same time.
I think it goes further than that. I want to say.
Yeah, it might go to like 16 or 12 or whatever.
It's pretty cool. I've never tried it or
just like daisy chaining GameCubes together. In
precisely.
Yeah, crazy. But that said, yeah, there are some significant multiplayer experiences on GameCube that could benefit. Now, here's the thing: Nintendo have said that the NES/SNES games they're going to release as part of the subscription are going to have newly added online features. So we know that it is a precedent that is being set already. We know that there is the capability for them to go out there and be like, okay, we're adding things to these games to make them more valuable, to add, proposition to it. And that makes sense, because if you take a look at the Virtual Console of the past few years, aside from, adding save state functionality and things like that on Wii U, there hasn't really been a progression in terms of what you get out of a digital product that is an old game. So, from that standpoint, I think it makes sense for them to add online. Whether it's different for a GameCube game versus a Super Nintendo or an NES, I don't know, because I don't really know the technicalities behind that stuff, but I would certainly love to see it if they did it. I mean, it would be stupid to say no, right? Because Melee, being a inherently multiplayer game, would benefit from that.
It's tough because say for an emulation, what a terrible word to use, the Wii Virtual Console on the Wii U. So say I downloaded a Wii game, how much would that cost me?
A Wii game on Wii U, I believe, is $17.99.
$17.99
is the current price in pounds.
I mean, is that a fair price or not? What I'm getting at is I'm not sure. Say GameCube Virtual Console comes out, they say, right, we're launching with Double Dash and Melee. We've implemented online functionality in both of these games. I don't know what they would charge, and I'm really worried that they would just charge through the nose, in the sense that they will feel like they've implemented a lot of change to these games and obviously full online functionality. They'll then want to just charge you way too much money. I'd be skeptical.
So you're talking about charging in terms of just the upfront cost of the game, because obviously by paying for the subscription service, the online is a part of that package.
Right. I mean just the upfront game, exactly.
Okay.
So I'm concerned about that and how they.
So you're thinking they're basically going to put a premium on these Virtual Console titles because of the added online?
Yes.
Yeah, that's something I haven't really thought about. I mean, interestingly enough, the NES and Super Nintendo stuff won't factor into that because they will be part of the subscription if you're a part of it. But I do wonder, like, if at the end of that month, say, and you have, I don't know, Super Mario Brothers, because you can do that switching the controller or whatever online, and they end it and then they put it on sale for you to just download and buy forever, is that a souped up cost versus the Virtual Console version of Super Mario Brothers on Wii U because of the added online? And yeah, that's tricky. I think that they could go the route of, if you're a subscriber, if you're someone who pays for the online stuff, then you get the game at the standard price, and they charge. But then it doesn't make any sense, because if they charge you more and you're not subscribing, you're not getting the benefit of the online. So maybe they don't have to actually do anything about it, because I'm envisioning a situation where the base version of Smash Brothers Melee is without online. If you don't have a subscription, it's going to be the price that they would set usually, which I would imagine probably about 15 quid for a GameCube game.
£15 is a very reasonable amount for a GameCube game on Virtual Console.
I mean, if we're talking about the scale with Wii games being 18 on Wii U Virtual Console, I think maybe 14, 15 probably makes sense.
N64 was like, what?
8, 9, maybe?
Right. It kind of fits that scale.
So it fits maybe in the middle there. So yeah, say that's the base price, but if you're paying for a subscription, you get the added online functionality. So we would be in a situation, Bally, essentially, where you wouldn't have to pay more because the cost of the online is being subsidized by your subscription.
Right.
If you see what I'm saying.
That would be a really fair way to do it. I definitely agree. I think that a really important point is the point that Tom has raised is like GameCube games, especially Melee, are incredibly expensive now. Like to find online. Say
Path
I
of
wanted
Radiance
like,
is the most ridiculous price. Like, I, for years, have been scouting out Path of Radiance on Amazon, on eBay. It's never anything below 200 quid. It is absurd. Like, it is actually insane.
And these are like first-party games that would come to Virtual Console with very few, any issues in terms of rights and stuff. So stuff like Rogue Squadron is very unlikely to come to Virtual Console.
Yeah, they would have to strike a deal with Star Wars.
Star Wars and Disney. Yeah, so there's a lot of hoops to jump through. But stuff like Melee, Double Dash, Luigi's Mansion, Fire Emblem, like these games, like sort of bread and butter of what you would envisage a GameCube Virtual Console to be like. It's just crying out for these games because they are so expensive elsewhere. And Melee, these are great games that people like should experience. And I mean, we've got our E3 predictions coming next time, but I don't know. That GameCube Virtual Console should come quick. And I mean, that is one of the strong rumors going around.
It is,
been going around for ages and is looking more likely than other rumors, perhaps.
Maybe, yeah. I do wonder what they're going to do around Virtual Console with E3, because I think it has to be some kind of announcement there. Especially when you're going into the summer with Splatoon 2 and you haven't even talked about the mobile app yet. Like, we need to hear more about this online stuff because we just don't really know anything about it. It's just kind of walking in blind. And I mean, Mario Kart so far people seem to enjoy, but it still is straddled with the Wii U problems because the infrastructure is still the same as what the Wii U Online was, which is, you have communities and you have all that stuff set up. So it is a bit of a mess right now, and they need to correct it, and they will eventually. But
stepping back, I honestly wouldn't put it past Nintendo to just do the GameCube Virtual Console, but not have any online functionality for Melee or Double Dash. Like I think that is a perfectly reasonable, likely outcome, which isn't much fun because those would be fantastic online games, but it just saves them a lot of time, effort, marketing, and we just talked in the previous question about like how people's opinions on Mario Kart might change and how you would market these things, and something like a Double Dash online could almost eat the tail of Mario Kart 8 HD, arguably. I know they're very different games, but some people just see Mario Kart as Mario Kart, and like that might be a dangerous game they want to get into. So, I mean, who knows? The same with Smash Brothers. We don't know what the situation with Smash Brothers is going forward.
I mean, I think
Switch.
we can assume that they're just going to put out the Wii U game, but souped up with a couple more characters and things. Like, that makes sense. It's just call it Smash Brothers Switch. But
I think you're right. We can assume, but we don't know that yet. And
no.
if Melee comes out before that with online functionality, they don't want that to usurp their grander plans. So
especially given the history of Melee and the fact that it's still a more popular competitive game these days.
Precisely. They might be sort of releasing the genie from the bottle on that one, and maybe they don't want to do that because it would completely pull the rug from under all their current plans in terms of the professional game of Smash Brothers and competitions, etc.
The one thing surrounding this that I think necessitates them doing online is they are now charging you for it. And if they are charging you for online and their only online offerings are ARMS and Mario Kart and Splatoon and maybe the new Smash Brothers, that's not a good enough proposition. If you just have these core first-party games that are the only things that have online play...
That you've already spent a ton of money on all those games.
Yeah,
like that's
exactly.
50, 60 euros, pounds, dollars, whatever they call it, a pop. Like
You want to have more things that you can play online, because otherwise it just feels like a waste of your time and your money to put into that. So the one thing I will say is, like, if they want to put these things out, not only set them apart from previous virtual consoles, but actually give the customer a better value for the online service they're paying for, they better add it in. And it's something that I keep talking about, is like, for years we've had Mario Party games while the internet is a thing, and they still haven't done online. I'm like, what the fucking shit are you doing, Nintendo? Mario Party is born for online. You have to do that at some point. Are they going to release a Mario Party that works online finally? Because the one problem I have with Nintendo, and you know, I think a lot of people love them for it, but they have an obsession with local multiplayer. And that's great, because I think it's an underserved thing, and I think a lot of people who like to get together and play games these days, you don't have the same kind of Halo split screen experience or GoldenEye that people used to have back in the day, but because all those games are online now. But Nintendo have kept that spirit of the local multiplayer. But they do that at the expense of online. And I'm fine with them doing local multiplayer, but please give people the option. Please let them have their goddamn nightmare Mario parties through the internet if they want to. It may not be a great idea, but just let them. You know, it's all about choice, and I think Nintendo need to give people choice, especially when they are charging you for online. And that's what it all comes down to. If they're charging you, they need to fucking make a proposition, because they can't just go out there asking for money and be like, well, it's the same as Wii U, where we just had a few online games. Like, no, it's not fucking good enough. So that's my stance. They need to actually do something.
And I mean, Virtual Console might be a great place to test out like a Mario Party online. You know, GameCube's got four Mario Parties?
I believe four. Yeah.
I mean, I own 3, which is maybe too many.
More than most people, I think.
Yeah. I mean, those are fun Mario Party games, so let's try those out online. If you're going to do Double Dash and Melee, let's get a few games going on with that online. Yeah. Like you said, charge people for the online functionality, but make it good. Give them something back in return, and people will snap it up. We'd love to play that. So
totally,
let's do it. Who knows?
Great.
I'm sure something in and around this question will be revealed at E3. So who knows?
Yes.
But yeah, that's all we've got time for when it comes to emails for our second segment this week. Well, like I said, E3 is coming. Our next episode is going to be a bit early. We're going to talk about that next segment, but we are going to do a pre-E3 episode, and we want your E3 predictions for 2017 and what Nintendo are going to do. Please send your emails to ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. Please send them in. We want your opinions, thoughts, and criticisms. There we go. Anyway, that's all we've got time for a second segment. Catch us in the third segment when we are going to talk about ARMS with the ARMS Direct and the ARMS Global Test Punch. Be right back.
Alright everyone, welcome back to the show for our third and final segment, wherein we shall be discussing ARMS. No, not our own ARMS, but the ARMS, the franchise, the new one, which Nintendo made up in January, and they're like, hey, here's the CG trailer of this man and lady, and everyone's like, what the fuck is this bullshit? But people are starting to come around, I think, on ARMS. And a couple of things to discuss here, because not only was there a Nintendo Direct focused solely on ARMS, but they have also put out a bit of a test punch, as they call it, analogous to Splatoon's Test Fire, and we have played a little bit of that. Not too many deep impressions, but first impressions is what you're going to get here, and maybe on next episode when we play a bit more of it, because they're doing 2 weekends of it, we may have a bit deeper impressions. But want to get our first thoughts here and all that stuff. Before we do that, however, let's talk about the Direct which happened. And they revealed a few things. They showed off some new characters. 3 new characters being Bark and Bite, who is a police dog and a policeman. We have Twintel, which the internet is just a flurry about. And then I believe Kid Cobra was the third one, who's a Twitch streamer. So, of course, that has to be represented these days in video games because it's become part of the consciousness. Bally, how do you feel about these new character introductions? And it seems like we have a final roster now of 10. They're promising some new ones down the line. But do you think that Nintendo have nailed it in terms of proposing these characters to us?
Yeah, pretty much. I think the world they've created, I think they covered a tiny bit of the lore in that Direct as well, and just
Biff returned, of course, to give us a bit of commentary on the side.
Right, exactly. It all looks and feels great. All the new characters I think are fantastic. Like it's just zany. It's a bit crazy. It's something only Nintendo might come up with, and it just works. Like it just pops as well. Like the colors, it just all fits seamlessly together, really.
It's very much that Mario Kart aesthetic, I think, but
Bloom,
going
shiny,
going
glossy.
a bit wilder. And this is the Mario Kart team who's working on this game, so it makes sense that it would share some aesthetic value with that title. But they definitely have gone a bit more out there, and it's as colourful, it's as bright, and it is as kind of welcoming, I think, as Mario Kart has ever been. So I think that's a good thing. I think that's something that we can be happy about. Is that so far, Nintendo, we have said for years, take too long to introduce new IP that's significant and relevant. And as soon as Splatoon happened, we're like, man, this is so great. I really wish they did this more. And they're doing it more. And, granted, some people are not going to be too into this game. Some people may not care about it. But at least the least you can say is Nintendo are adding another bunch of characters to their stable, which they hadn't in a long time, I think. I think even if you talk about Splatoon, aside from like Callie and Marie, they aren't really characters, right? They're just like inkling boy and girl.
You're going all the way back to, aside from perhaps Mii's, which don't have much personality, arguably, you're going all the way back to Pikmin before like the last sort of Nintendo IP was invented, I believe.
Well, significant one, because we do have eShop ones. Look, Box Boy, what a icon Box Boy is. We love him. But he's not quite on the mainstream level of a lot of these other ones. They just announced they basically ran through how a lot of these characters work. They all seem to have like special abilities, and they kind of explained some more in detail stuff about how every single arm was related to the character and how you would use them. They have like the example of Helix, which is the weird gloop monster, using one of his arms as a guard block while he kind of uses his bloop thing over the top. There's a bunch of like status effects and things going in there. See, it seemed to me when I was watching it like it was a very complicated, a lot of depth going on here, and that's something that I guess we'll come to when we talk about actually playing it. But I don't know, it's hard for me personally to judge that stuff because I'm not a fighting game fan, right? And the only fighting game I really like is Smash Brothers, aside from that Soul Calibur, which even to that degree, Soul Calibur's not your Street Fighter kind of traditional fighting game either. So it's definitely something that I'd have to get used to. But the other things that I think are significant from the Direct is they said they are going to obviously do this global Testpunch, which we're about to talk about. But the other significant thing is you can really see that ARMS is following in the footsteps of Splatoon to a T. Because not only do you have the kind of demo test thing for people to try out, you also have the promise of ongoing support via free updates, which are coming probably at a frequent pace. So we have new characters coming, new stages, and new arms, which, obviously that's the name of the game. It's the most important collectible here. And that seems pretty good, all things considered, because when you're talking about an online game, it's very important to keep the community engaged and keep them going along with it. And I think especially with things like Call of Duty, they get splintered sometimes because of these DLC paid-for maps, where some people have them, some people don't. But if you're offering it as a free service, then it means everyone's in the clear and everyone's kind of on the same playing ground. So, I don't know, Bally, do you think that this is something that they're going to continue doing for multiplayer-focused games? It seems like Splatoon was a good blueprint for them.
Definitely. I think it did work well with Splatoon, where it was almost like Twitter updates, and then you just be like, oh, there's this new gun. And definitely for the first few, between updates to guns and stages, we were both kind of like, oh, we got to log in and play some more Splatoon for a while, and like it kept you coming back over weeks and then eventually months. And I think if you do have a game like ARMS, you need that online community to sort of build and grow and then stay. Like stickiness with online communities in online multiplayer games is so crucial, and you see so many companies invest tons in, you know, promotion of a game. Like, off the top of my head, something like Evolve was like a big one that kind of the community was there for all of like a few weeks and then it just vanished. And it's so important that they stick around, and Nintendo have done really well to like look after and keep stuff coming with that Splatoon community. And if I log into Splatoon right now, like I can just go online and play some matches in any mode I want, and it'll work. And like I think they'll just want to try and copy that format for ARMS because it works so well for Splatoon.
Yeah, totally. It's kind of shocking that, you know, on a console like Wii U, to this day, it still has people online playing that game because it has such a dedicated fan base to it. So if they can pull off the same thing, I think I'd be impressed. I don't know if they can. We'll get to that. But the other thing that I want to mention is that they did talk about some single-player stuff. Being the Mario Kart team, apparently they can't think of a more creative single-player name mode than Grand Prix because that's all they know. So it's basically like a 10-fighter thing where you go through. It's like basically an arcade mode, your traditional arcade mode in a fighting game, just fighting a bunch of not NPCs, AI controlled opponents, and you know, facing some boss at the end, I presume, which I think they gave a glimpse of in the trailer with like multiple arms on his back and all this other stuff. But aside from that, there are some other modes, which was like the target thing, where you hit targets and there are people on the other side and you can hit them to put them off. There's the volleyball mode, where you're playing volleyball against someone and you have to use your arms to hit it over the net. And then there's the basketball one, where if you grab someone, you dunk them in the net. So these kind of three different things going on, which are a variation to the playstyle and mixing it up, as well as the addition of like 4-player matches where you're all tied together, and you know, you can have multiple different kind of variations within. So it seems like lots of different varieties of playstyle going on here, which I think is as far as they can really go. And I was thinking to myself, like, how do you create a single-player fighting game mode that isn't driven around story? Because I know Nintendo aren't really a big fan of doing that generally, unless you're talking about Smash Brothers, frickin' what the hell do you call it? Subspace Emissary. And yeah, so I'm like, well, what can they do aside from this? And I don't know. Like, I think I would like some more creative single-player stuff, but yeah, it's hard to really envision what they would do otherwise. But do you think that this is enough, essentially, Bally? Like, do you think those modes combined with this online is enough to satisfy the person who's interested in ARMS?
I think it will almost kind of link into our next discussion on how the game feels, because I think even for a fighting game, as long as the game feels good and that those basic mechanics work, I think what they've promised in terms of modes is definitely enough. Like, that's great. I think that would be great to have some sort of single-player story mode campaign that just sort of had cutscenes and delved deeper into like the histories of these crazy characters, because they are bloody crazy. Like, how did that come about? A bit more lore in there, that'd be nice. But even without that, I think that this game has a lot going for it. Okay.
Well, maybe we should then get into our play session, because we just played about an hour of it. As part of the global Testpunch, which is ongoing. By the time this podcast goes up, there'll be one more weekend of it, which will be June, I believe, the 3rd and 4th. Trying to check my calendar. Yes, that's correct. I'm right, 3rd and 4th. I think America get one that's a more of a amenable time on the Friday, which they did this weekend as well. But it's like 1 a.m. for us, or 2 a.m. for you, Bally, I guess. So not really the best of times. But we just played one today, and how do you feel about this, Bally? Because I think the one thing that we need to talk about is the motion controls, how they feel, and what kind of impression you get from them using them long-term as part of playing this game.
It feels good, but not perfect. It feels... Some of the modes I thought were incredibly frustrating. I think the second that I wasn't in a one-on-one match, standard match, against an opponent, I felt like it was just too chaotic. It wasn't fun. There was no control. Like you could just get snuck up from behind. It wasn't easy to, and I know you worked out how to change the character you're focused on later, but
Yeah.
you just got snuck up from behind. I didn't massively enjoy the volleyball mode, but I thought that the basic format of 1 versus 1 and the mind games and the thought that you can put into dodging and blocking and punching works really well, and both with regards to motion controls and the standard Joy-Con grip controls.
So I think that when I first booted it up and tried the tutorial, I was pretty positive on how the controls felt. Like the motion stuff has a nice hit to it when, you know, the HD rumble kicks in.
Right,
you feel
good.
the feedback. Like there's some good satisfying feedback there. The one thing that I'm worried about is moving around and jumping and stuff. It can get a little awkward, and it feels like a compromise that they had to make, because in terms of moving, you're just tilting the Joy-Cons left and right. And I don't think that that's a good way to deal with the situation, because obviously you have to have the motion control for the punching, and that works pretty well, I think. But I don't like the fact that movement is tied to the tilt. I really wish if they'd been able to, and this would have had to change the control scheme, would be just hold the Joy-Cons normally, just one in each hand, and so you have access to the analog stick, but you're also able to execute the motion controls. And I get they have this whole thumbs up pose idea, and they're trying to make it more simple for like jumping and dashing on those buttons to make it accessible, but it was a little awkward to get used to. And especially, I agree with you, in the big multiplayer arenas, especially when you have 3 people in there, was really awkward, because there was one stage which was some stairs going down. One person would start at the bottom and 2 people would start at the top, but the 2 people at the top were a really awkward angle to each other. So trying to maneuver your way around to even see the other person and to get your arm to hit them was a bit of a strain, I felt, and I thought that wasn't very well handled.
Yeah, it's strange, because I do, the second you switch to the Joy-Con grip, the moving around using the analog stick feels great, but all of a sudden your punches feel a bit less impactful almost. Whereas when you're in what I felt was when you were in the Joy-Con mode, the punches felt great, but like you said, the moving about felt a bit strange. And I think I can get more used to the Joy-Cons by themselves rather than the grip, with just a bit more practice with the moving around, etc. And I appreciate that they don't want you to be able to move very fast, because ultimately if you can move fast, you can just always avoid your opponent's punches. They want you to actually move slowly and have to think a lot more about the dash, the jump, and the block. Like there's a massive, you can definitely feel the emphasis on those 3 things, which is huge for any fighting game, I guess. Like you don't want any fighting game where you can just move so fast you can always avoid their moves simply by moving. It's about the blocks and the timing and that sort of thing. So that's where this game, you do feel you need like a long time to get used to it and get better at that sort of thing. I thought that with the Joy-Con, sometimes I was just like, I'd just go for a punch, and then I'd do a punch with my arm, and then the punch would just swerve off way wide of where I sort of wanted to aim it. So I feel like there's also a lot of practice you can get used to with sort of hooking and almost slicing your punches, as it were, where you want to bend punches. And there are some arms, I should say, use the terminology, that kind of can bend a lot more easily than other arms, but that also takes a lot of getting used to. So I think that it's not quite as easy to pick up and play as a game like Splatoon. And in that sense, the hour-long, let's just give this game a whirl kind of experience, I don't think was as strong. Just because I think that this game takes hours and hours of sitting down and probably practicing with a single character and understanding the best way that character can move around and traverse the stage, and in relation to their punches, because it's quite a lot to get your head around, to be honest.
Yeah, it really is. And I feel that thing about the bending of the arms and getting them to kind of swerve around your opponent is something that I was never really cognizant of, because I was just trying to keep my head in like, oh god, I need to not get hit, and I also need to hit them. Like, there's something about fighting games that is paralyzing in a way when you're new to them, because you're just so terrified about doing anything that you're not on that echelon of like the chess level, where a lot of fighting games are basically mind games, because the players of them are so good that they can kind of execute anything at any time, and so they're always thinking ahead and thinking what's going to come next and putting pressure on your opponent, so like distracting them with one and then swerving them with the other. And like, as new players to this, we're not thinking about that whatsoever. It's just completely out of mind and out of sight. So that was something that I felt wasn't really beneficial, and why I thought when I went to the standard controls, I felt the difference for sure, but it wasn't as big of a difference as I expected it to be. In the sense that, like, not being able to maneuver the arms as well in standard controls was fine, because I wasn't really doing it that much to a like smart degree in motion controls anyway, right? Like,
exactly.
It was weird. And I will say that definitely by the end, I think I prefer the motion controls overall as a package versus the standard ones, if only because the button mapping is really fucking weird, and just trying to get your head around, okay, well, I use some face buttons to jump and dash, but I can use the shoulder buttons to punch, but I also can use some face buttons to punch if I want, and guarding is clicking in the left stick, which is just bad. Like, that is straight up bad control design. Like, what the fuck are you doing? You really should be putting guard on something, which makes way more sense. But again, maybe it's just Nintendo being so bullish with their motion controls that they just don't give a second thought to how normal people play, fighting games without them. And yeah, I feel like a lot of people have complained in recent times about Nintendo's control schemes, especially with Zelda being a little weird. And I don't know what it is with them, but they kind of feel like they have to forge their own
still
path.
Jumping
in a
with
sense.
that X button as well. Like, it's just between this Zelda Splatoon, they just want you always jumping with that X button. It's a bit strange.
Yeah, it is. In terms of the Splatoon comparison, I think it's an interesting one to bring up, because Splatoon is inherently a non-competitive game, from the sense of not non-competitive, I mean non-confrontational, right?
Yeah.
Where the main mode in Splatoon does not dictate that the player has to go after enemies and shoot them with precision accuracy. Splatoon is built around the premise that you can be an aid to your team even if you're not very good at shooting. And the idea that it's non-confrontational means that in some mode, well, in the main mode, really, like if you're talking about Splatoon, the main mode is based on that.
Yeah.
So the idea that someone who wants to get into fighting games but isn't really happy with the idea of confrontational stuff, this isn't the equivalent for Splatoon to shooters to what this would be for fighting games, because this is a competitive game. It's 100% confrontational, and it's 100% complex and deep and hard to get into, and that's where I worry here, because I just it is both a blessing and a curse that Nintendo gave us this demo, because a lot of people, I think, are going to bounce straight off ARMS, and they were very excited about it, and like, oh, those characters look great, and I was really excited, and then I played it, and then I realized that no, this isn't actually as friendly as other fighting games, and it is just as complex as those ones, and it's hard, and it will take a lot of dedication and time, and I think that's going to be a turning off point for many people, because it's not the same inviting nature that other things have had from the Nintendo stable.
Yeah, and it's tricky because the art style, the character design, it's very welcoming. It looks like it's going to hold your hand, but it really,
totally.
It doesn't feel like that when you're playing it. And yeah, I must say that this global Testpunch did throw a lot at you. Like, I think we had the choice of something like 8 different characters, and of those 8 characters, they each had 3 different arms per arm, so you could do different combinations, etc. Some of them had like the same arms repeated between characters for sure, but I just need like time to like go away with a single character with this game and focus on their 3 different types of arms and work out combos and practice and do target tests and play more people online, and like it was all just thrown at me at once, and it didn't feel overly positive, even though there were moments within that hour where, like I said, my favorite was easily the one-on-one matches of the standard matches. There are moments where I would feel like I dodged like a grab, and then I got in my punch, and then I'd follow it up with my second punch, and I'd get a KO, and like it felt like I was actually building at times on what I'd already learned. But other modes just felt so flat, and even in one-on-one, if you face someone who really knew what they were doing, you felt so powerless. Like you were just
absolutely.
getting grabbed, and then the second you got grabbed again, then the second you got grabbed that time, you get punched, and then you don't know when to block, when to jump, when to dash. You're just fodder basically, and that's a tough thing to get your head around, and takes hours of practice.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that was problematic was not only did they give you way too many options, but because some people had the practice already from the first hour, there were immediately people who had the advantage for us when we were going into it. So my first match, I was getting destroyed. I couldn't do anything. I felt so useless, and I was like, man, this is not fun. Like, I really hope that my whole play session here isn't just going to be me getting destroyed, because I need to build up to something, and I don't think that training section does a very good job of teaching you the basics of like fighting someone. It teaches you the controls, sure, but doesn't really give you a good idea of how you're supposed to maneuver properly around someone, and what the best like ways of dealing with people are when they're trying to do a specific thing. It is very intimidating, I think, and that's just generally the feeling I got from playing this. But I'll agree with you that when you had kind of found someone who was on equal terms with you and was kind of, you could see they were equally kind of struggling with the controls and figuring things out.
They'd throw out punches all over the place, and you think, all right, they're just starting.
Exactly. And then you could kind of test the waters a bit more and get things going. And certainly, I think that the best way to play a game like this is to choose a character, go away and learn them, and just focus in. Because when you're just, and especially the problem with the Testpunch is you want to do everything and try everything, because it's only an hour at a time. So you want to squeeze in as much as you possibly can. And you want to try every character. So that's what I was doing. I was like bouncing between characters. And ultimately, if you want to do well, you can't do that. You can't just change characters constantly, because you're always having to navigate different control schemes, or not control schemes, but like the different weight classes. Some people are much slower than others, and then some of the arms are much less wieldy. Like the big ones are much heavier, and they don't impact as easily as kind of the short, quick ones. It's something that you need to be like committed to in a certain way, and in this demo environment, I just don't think that it worked as well. Like, I really think that if they had just pared it down to, say, Springman and Ribbon Girl, and just been like these two characters,
right,
and just basic vanilla, and focused
Make it a
on
bit more vanilla than it was. It was quite a lot to take in.
Yeah.
And just keep it to one-on-one matches as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, throwing in the volleyball stuff was fun and interesting. I actually enjoyed those because it was a bit of a change of pace. They did go by very quickly, and they were a little awkward because, from what I could tell, you can't really curve your punches up that easily. Like, it seems like the curvature is like left or right, and going up or down, I didn't really know how to do that with the Joy-Con. It didn't seem like it was really built for that stuff. But I enjoyed it, and I think that as cool as that basketball and volleyball stuff looked, I think they are quite shallow, and they probably will get thrown to the side by the time people really get into this game. They're just going to eventually focus down on one-on-one matches. Especially because the 2-on-2 stuff, when you're tied together, such a chaotic fucking mess. And you've already said that it was just, you couldn't really tell what was going on. It's even harder when you're running into your own opponent, because you're like blocking each other out of the way, and you can't really, you're like trying to get out, but they're stretching. And it's like, the idea is it's supposed to be fun and chaotic and weird, but like, when you're trying to learn this game especially, not the best idea, right? Like, it's worse than Smash Brothers, I think. Like, Smash Brothers, for a newcomer, if you're going in there and you're playing with all these items, you don't have a fucking clue what's going on the screen. Everything's exploding, weird things are happening, they've got assist trophies. And this, while it doesn't have all that crazy like external stuff going on, there was a lot of like charge up moves and like all the arms flying through the air, all this crisscrossing going on essentially.
Yeah.
Basically creates screen vomit that is really difficult to pass in a way that is just, it didn't really work for me at all.
Yeah. And I definitely want to try the next Testpunch, and I'm not sold one way or the other on like to buy or not to buy. It's strange. I don't know if I'm closer or further away.
I almost feel, Bally, that with all these hours of the Testpunch, I feel like there are going to be people who get their fill in the same way that when I played For Honor over that beta weekend, I was like, this is a cool game. I've got my fill. I don't need to buy this. There is something about this that feels... And I know there's going to be progression in the game. That's something we didn't talk about. It's like when you win fights, or even if you lose fights, you gain a currency, and then that currency can be used to spend on new arms and unlocking different things. And I hope there's a bit more to it than just getting new arms, because I would like to, I don't know, spend that on different skins or something like that, like unlock some more material things that I would care about aesthetically, because that's something that if you're going to be getting people coming back to this game, you want to get them to be invested, and being invested is easy if you have a progression system, right? And that's part of the reason Splatoon got you, is because you can unlock new weapons by getting more experience and higher levels and all that stuff, right? And that's something that is important to an online game, is to just keep you engaged. But that said, if the mechanics are something that I feel I'm never going to really be that good at, and eventually all these people are going to be destroying me online, and I'm never really going to have that much fun with it because I don't want to commit the time to learn it, and I kind of get what I need out of these Testpunches, I don't know. I really don't know if I need this game. It's really hard, and I'm going to play more of it. I want to try more Testpunches, but at
When
this
does
point,
it come out?
It's the end of E3 week. It's the 16th
when does
of June.
Splatoon 2 come out?
21st of July, so about a month later.
See, that's tempting, because if Splatoon was first, I'm going to snap that up day one, and this
absolutely,
that might shove ARMS out of the way. But with ARMS before, it's like, maybe I should pick it up. So I don't know, it's tight.
Yeah, and honestly, for me, it always comes down to price point, regardless of the game. Like, usually I'm very price conscious, especially in the UK, where we don't want to spend anything above like 35 quid on a new game most of the time. And I feel like ARMS may be coming down in price. We'll see. It's currently a bit higher on Amazon, but they usually start off like that and usually come down over time. But I don't know. It sucks, because I really thought this Testpunch would be the thing that convinced me one way or the other, and now I feel even more confused.
Yeah.
Now I feel even less sure, or confident in my decision, and that's hard.
And it's annoying because had they just left it, made this Testpunch a bit more vanilla and just thrown a little less at you, I might be more positive, just because I'd be like, right, I really get Springman. I really understand how he's working. I've had like an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours with him, and like I'm liking it. I understand his play set. Now I want to buy the game and like move on.
And to some
other
extent, you
characters.
can do that yourself, but the only thing that throws a curveball is, well, you can't guarantee you're doing a 1 versus 1 every time, because sometimes it'll throw you into these random ones. But yeah, I don't know. Before we close, let's talk about the characters, because there were a lot of them, and I don't know which ones you used, which ones you tried out. I know that you like to be Mr. Vanilla and you want to learn things like that, so I imagine you were using Springman the most as you went through.
Yeah, no, I love me some vanilla, and I like learning a game through the most vanilla mediocre character, because I don't know, it's just how do you explain it? It's nice.
It teaches you the mechanics, really.
Exactly. So. I really liked Springman. I quite liked the mummy guy by the end. I thought the punch, the big weighted punch that can go through other punches. You literally have to dodge this punch. There's nothing else you can do to it. Felt
right, because there's
quite
different weight
satisfying.
classes for the arms. So if it's a lighter one, then they can't basically block it down with one of theirs, like a counter punch essentially, which is an interesting thing. And I really think that I needed to get more used to stopping grabs by counter punching instead of like trying to dodge them all the time. Because the grab is very well telegraphed, so you can knock out the way if you have a equal or heavier arm at your disposal. And I just tended to just be like, oh, jump dash, jump dash, jump dash, and sometimes that wouldn't work out, right?
Right.
So definitely that's something that I need to keep in mind. So yeah, mainly those two characters then you were going with. Did you try anyone else?
I think I tried all of them for one or two matches for sure. I liked... Min was cool. I think she's just got like these arms that shoot a lot of stuff. And I don't know, there's like this dragon arm that has like a laser or something. I also loved the Slapamander. Is that what it's called?
Is that the one that Ribbon Girl has, I think?
Yes. That felt very powerful.
I didn't like that at all. I could never hit with it. I don't know.
It felt like it just sort of slapped across a big horizontal slap across the entire stage.
Yeah, there wasn't really a big weight to it. So.
Yeah, it was good, and I sort of just got a little taster of each of these arms, and I didn't really know what I was doing with them, and that's where like you do need to just sit down with it, and it's where like maybe next hour I might just stick with Springman for the whole thing and just get used to his 3 different types of arms, and by the end of that hour have some real knowledge on how to maneuver him, really, because I didn't have any this time.
Yeah, I jumped around a bit as well. I tried pretty much everyone, but I think my favorite was Mechanica, actually. She is more of a heavy character, but the arms that she was using, one of them was I didn't use the hammer one that much because that seemed like a very slow kind of wind-up one. But she had like the missile one, which was quite heavy like and did explosive. Missile. Yeah, and then she had like the triple like quick one. So she had like 2 different varieties that I think worked quite well together, like kind of chip damage one and the big heavy one, to the point where when her special activated, I just completely destroyed people with it because the combination of the 2 was just unstoppable. And I liked the way that she dodged, and she had the kind of jetpack on her back, and the jump dashing was good, and that worked well for me. So, and definitely towards the end, I felt like I was getting more control and understanding of how she played, and that I think is the ultimate goal. As we've just been saying constantly through this segment, is you need to commit and you need to just learn someone, because otherwise you're not going to have a good time. Despite the bad start where I was just getting fucking destroyed, and you came on Skype and I was like, Bally, what the fuck, I can't beat anyone in this game. By the end I was doing okay, I think. There are definitely clearly people who are better than me, because there are always going to be people better than you because it's a video game, but I was holding my own sometimes, which was nice. And yeah, we'll see for sure. This is a weird scenario to be in. I didn't expect to have such mixed feelings, but I guess this game inspired mixed feelings the first time we ever saw it, because it was like, hey, Nintendo's doing new IP, great. Also, it's based on motion controls and it's a fighting game. Yeah, I don't know. So,
I don't know what to say.
I don't know. Yeah, we'll kind of just.
We'll definitely try the next Testpunch, and we'll probably have some more thoughts on this. And I'm sure everyone will find out whether we bite on this game or not.
Yeah,
because that's the crucial decision to make.
Totally. So there, I guess we'll just close things out with that discussion of arms. Bally, things are heating up because E3 is rumbling down the tracks. The hype train's rolling in. We've got to get on. Everyone, make sure your tickets are ready. Get your seat. What are our plans for E3, Bally? Well, I'll tell you what our plans are. You know what the funny thing is? Because Kermode and Mayo, who do the film review podcast I listen to, they always joke all the time about how newsreaders or journalists or whatever, to stall for time, they ask a question and they immediately answer that question. It's like, well, what are we going to do for E3? Well, I'll tell you what we're going to do for E3. We're going to do this for E3. And it's a tactic. Anyway, side tangent aside.
Stalling the 24-hour news cycle, when you actually break it down and try and break down what the newsreaders are actually telling you. they filibuster for time all the time. That's all they do, because they're just trying to get between interviews and get between stories. And they're just,
it's a skill.
It is a skill, and it's when you break it down, it can become very mindless. So yeah.
Well, you know what? We're podcast hosts, and we're just as mindless.
We are very mindless.
How about that? All right. So here's the plan for E3, Bally. The podcast is going to come out a little earlier because Nintendo's E3 press conference, or Spotlight as they have named it, is happening on Tuesday, the 13th of June. Which means that our usual episode would technically go out on Monday the 12th. But in order to give you time to listen and to maybe hear our predictions before you see the Nintendo thing and then they're useless, we're going to put it out early. We're going to put it out on the Friday before, which is Friday the 9th of June. And that also means that we would like some of your E3 predictions. So we have an email address. You can send them to us. Bally, what is that email address?
Please send your E3 predictions to ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com.
Yeah, we want to hear all your Nintendo stuff. If you have some others, sure, throw those in there as well. But we're going to be focusing on Nintendo predictions. So next time we will be giving you our predictions for Nintendo's E3 presents. Again, that is the 9th of June, Friday, that is coming out. So get your emails in before then. And then when E3 happens, as soon as the Nintendo Spotlight presentation is over, Bally and I are going to do our best to record a podcast as quickly as possible. I'll edit it, throw it up, and hopefully have it with you before Tuesday is over, so you have all our thoughts and impressions from Nintendo's announcements on Tuesday the 13th. So you're getting 2 podcasts in a short space of time. You're so lucky. We spoil you. Seriously, it's too much. But yeah, we're excited for E3. It's going to be a fun time. Bally, I know you always look forward to Nintendo. Are you going to watch anything else this year aside from Nintendo? I know you sometimes dip in.
I always try to watch the Giant Bomb commentary of the Sony and Microsoft press conferences, because if you watch them, this is my Nintendo fanboy coming out now, so get ready. But when you watch those press conferences by themselves, we talk about filibustering time just now. Oh my God, they take a long time, and sometimes
there's a lot of fluff in press conferences.
Even if there's maybe 5, 6, 7, 8, even 9 big announcements, when you're watching an hour and a half press conference, there is so much dead time, and people say, what we're going to tell you, this is what we're going to tell you, and it just goes round and round, and you need...
I don't know, Bally. Last year's Sony press conference was pretty lean. They had that orchestra, and it was just game.
It was leaner. I'll give them that, and it was a good one. And Horizon looked great, and it came out great, and I think there's lots of good stuff to come. So I will try to dip in, but often through the warm arms of Giant Bomb.
Oh, what warm arms. Run into those warm arms. Oh, God, arms. Jesus.
Arms.
All right, well.
God damn.
With all that, we have to tell you where to find us on the internet before we go. So, Bally, where can people find you?
Please find me on Twitter. I'm at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN91. And also follow our Twitter account for the podcast, which is at TNL Podcast. That is at TNL Podcast. It's the best place to go to find out when the latest show's coming out, when the latest video on YouTube is coming out on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/ThisNintendoLife.
There you go. Got it eventually. A lot of links. We've got to dish out a lot of links on this show. You can find me at another link, which is twitter.com/Lordnbz. At Lordnbz on the Twitters. Also, we never bring up Miiverse anymore because RIP Miiverse, but I actually posted some stuff on Miiverse because I'm playing a 3DS game, which is Fire Emblem Echoes. I did the triangle attack with the Pegasus Sisters, Bally. I know you know all about that, so you're very excited. I can tell. So you can check that stuff out there. You can find us various places. We're on iTunes. We are on Stitcher. We are on any podcasting app available wherever good podcasts are sold. You may download us, peruse us, review us, all at your discretion. And it would be appreciated because it's how the show gets out to people. And it's also E3's coming up. So if you want E3 to be cool with loads of people listening, then how about you review us? Before then, give us a bit of a boost, a bit of a bump, and people can find out about the show. Because I know lots of people, more people than usual, download podcasts during E3 because it's all about opinions, all about thoughts. So aside from that, I think we're pretty much good to go, Bally. How are you feeling going into this season of announcements?
Excited, you know. New console. Like how long ago was it the last time we could say that going into E3? Like a console's just come out. Like normally they're sort of at a different time, but the fact that Switch came out in like March and now here we go, first E3.
Yeah.
Let's have some 2017 Switch games.
This is the first E3 Nintendo Switch has ever been at, and it's already out. That I don't think that's ever happened before with
weird.
a games console.
It's very weird.
It was never shown at E3. How bizarre. But it's going to be exciting. There's going to be some cool stuff. And I know that all of you are going to be watching along and listening along with us. So thank you for that. And we shall, of course, see you in 2 weeks' time with some more Nintendo chat, some more This Nintendo Life. Goodbye, everyone. The musical interludes used on today's show were Prince Berkut's theme from Fire Emblem Echoes, Shadows of Valentia, copyright Nintendo 2017, and Freedom from Thomas Was Alone, copyright Mike Bithell 2012.
I plucked hairs from my nose.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
My nose is real bad about that shit.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Do you do anything to it?
No, I should probably.
See, my dad's got a nose trimmer, but I don't have a nose trimmer.
No.
So I just like got tweezers and.
Wait,
just
you mean inside your nose?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
What do you mean?
I mean on like the top of my nose.
The top of your nose.
Yeah, they've got like little hairs.